What to you decides if a game is bad or not? Is it the game's combat? Or is it the game's story? Maybe it's even the game's characters. In today's day and age, video games are widely known as some of the most highly critiqued forms of media out today. And personally, I believe it's only going to get more strict as time passes and technology advances. I yearn for the feeling of what older gen gaming got us. Booting up PS2 games like Silent Hill 2, Bully, Shadow of the Colossus, and PS3 games like Metal Gear Solid 4, Wet, Undead Nightmare, God of War, and Dante's Inferno. Another title that as a child I had a lot of fun playing on the PS3 was Silent Hill Homecoming. Now, from a child's perspective that had no recollection of the lore or story but just had imagery of the game in my head, Silent Hill Homecoming was a masterpiece and an artful work. But as I've learned the lore in my older years and realized what Homecoming was to long-term fans, I started to despise it. But honestly, Silent Hill Homecoming is not that bad. For those of you who don't know, Silent Hill Homecoming is regarded as one of the worst Western titles of Silent Hill, mainly for its blatant copying of Silent Hill 2, the combat system being really slow and choppy, and the ports just being really unoptimized. But I'm here to show you what we can take from Homecoming and see the title in a better light and maybe even call it a better game than Downpour. Before we fully start this video, I do just want to put out a disclaimer that this was recorded on a PlayStation 3 emulator. This just goes to show how shit the PC port is, and I didn't have the resources nor the physical copy of the PlayStation 3 edition to record this on the real console, so I do apologize in advance. I'm going to get straight into the video. Silent Hill Homecoming came out in 2008 and was developed by Double Helix Games, best known for Silent Hill Homecoming and G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. I will say that this was a very big screaming foreshadow for fans during this time because Double Helix hadn't even come out with a game before this. We begin the game as Alex Shepard, a decommissioned war veteran coming back home to the town known as Shepherd's Glen, a town roughly 30 minutes from Silent Hill. We start in a nightmarish dream of him being strapped to a gurney and being taken to a surgery room. After watching the nurses that escorted us die, we escape the room and see a young boy rush to a locked door. This young boy is Alex's younger brother Josh. After unlocking the door by finding a gate code and finding a door key, we end up finding Josh but are still in pursuit. Alex turns to an elevator entering and dies to a large sword after only recently entering. After it seemingly being a bad dream, we wake up in a truck with Travis Grady, the main character of Silent Hill Origins. We get dropped off at the beginning of Shepherd's Glen and we start our journey. The entire town is eerily similar to Silent Hill. Like, Travis and Alex seem to be the only two people existing inside or outside the town, as well as it being covered in fog. After arriving home, Alex proceeds to his house and finds his mother catatonic, hyperfixating on Alex's father, leaving to go find Josh. Promising to find him, he leaves his home. To cut it shortly, the whole story after progressing through your Shepherd's Glen and Silent Hill, Alex finds out that his family is tied to the Order. Members of the Order made a deal with the members of Shepherd's Glen that as long as they sacrificed a child every 50 years, that they'd live in peace. He then realizes that he was supposed to be the sibling sacrifice, but he killed his own brother on accident, in turn breaking the code and forcing the monsters of Silent Hill onto Shepherd's Glen. Reception of this game was weird. It got mostly 70s across the board on Metacritic on release, saying that the score and the atmosphere was what really saved this game much scrutiny, but kept the major opinion the same, that being its westernization is what ultimately made it mediocre. The modern consensus now is that it was optimized horribly, and that's beyond true. I literally couldn't play this game on PC, which albeit was kind of the regular on games from the early 2000s because consoles reigned supreme, and the ports for these consoles were priority. That being said, I ran into crashes, audio cuts, and the game just sometimes never launching. I literally had to scour the Reddits of Silent Hill fandoms to find a fix for it off Dropbox, and I wasn't willing to do that. Lastly, I'd say that the next major two critiques is that the combat is just not what Silent Hill was or could have been, and that the story was just way too much like Silent Hill 2. Now, the combat I kinda enjoyed sometimes, but the issues emerged when they'd throw 5 or 6 monsters at you at a time knowing you had no ammo, forcing you to kill them because they cut up to Alex really quickly. Monsters also sometimes just got free hits on you, and this was even more prevalent fighting bosses. Then, when you throw QuickTime events and choppy frames during combat in the mix, it's just a recipe for break and immersion. Comparing Homecoming to its counterpart Silent Hill 2, they are vastly different games. Silent Hill 2 focused primarily on survival. On first-hand experience, the majority of people who played this game in its present launch sucked at the combat. I know this because I'd literally watched my parents die over and over again on these monsters. Knowing what we know now, you can easily weave through most enemies if you got lucky enough, but I think the horror lied in those details. Regardless whether you felt threatened enough to either go through the room wiping every creature you see, or weave through them and making sure you've planned an exit route before the bosses, both prove you are afraid of these monsters. The recipe is simple and it gets the job done, so why is Homecoming's combat so bad? I would be fine just saying that the monsters in the game have hard to dodge attacks, or that Alex and his wide array of melee weapons are just simply too slow. It's honestly still both of those, but there are other reasons why that are far more concerning. The drops in ammo and health are not frequent enough to stay comfortable in its environment. And before you go telling me that that's the point, let me add that in a game that literally spawns in twice or maybe 3 times the amount of monsters with twice the health, and you're still only given the same amount of resources from a game made in 2001, you are going to run into numerous problems, like resorting to spread your resources so incredibly thin you don't know if you're gonna make it out or not, or running through the entire map without using any resources and praying you make it out alive, or lastly, getting so good at reading the monster's combat that afterwards you can no-hit any From Software game because you have become a master at reading telegraphic movements. But none of that matters because yes, like most horror games, you'd think spreading your resources thin and just barely scraping by would suffice because that is the way of the game type in the first place. But unfortunately, all those elements aren't even present because you simply don't get enough resources to spread thin. You're always out of medkits, and when you backtrack to try to find more resources, you're bombarded with more monsters that will get to you eventually because Alex runs about as fast as Undertaker walking down the ramp during his intro. And I'd love to just run through the whole map, but unfortunately, like I said previously, monsters catch up to Alex too fast to make running away viable. And if that wasn't enough, some doors are soft locked by Alex's weapons, so even if you wanted to just run through the whole map, you better make sure you backtrack and have those weapon locations memorized. But alas, there are more monsters in those rooms, and thus you cannot run away entirely. Lastly, grinding time with the monsters and learning their movesets is actually a very viable way to avoid taking damage unnecessarily, besides the schisms. Fighting schisms and nurses can be really fun, and the smogs are a hard counter for close quarters, making you take a gamble for health or ammunition from your guns. But unfortunately, some of these monsters have hard to see moves that are almost impossible to dodge, like the goddamn schism. But none of that matters because the knife has a combo so broken that it gets any monster in a stun lock so godly that you literally will not need to use any heals unless you're fighting a boss. A lot of these mechanics in this game scream, wow, what a good horror game. And then the mechanics fuck it up for everyone because even the story has its moments of glory and weakness. This game is a lot like Silent Hill 2. Now, I don't even really need to explain why Silent Hill 2 is such an easy game to copy. This game is almost absolutely perfect. Silent Hill Homecoming's story of playing a kinda stupid sounding mysterious man that is in search of a person that is entirely impossible to meet is one thing, but also using goddamn Pyramid Head but goth, as well as the already annoying sexy nurses, is just icing on the cake. Homecoming's story follows every precipice that Silent Hill 2 foundationalized. Granted, I can't blame them. It's just unfortunate because honestly, if they would have just fine-tuned some things in the story, maybe did their research, I wouldn't have been mad about the decision. But there are some parts of the story that are unique and they kind of give me a light bulb moment and I see some hope for the title. The first area that immediately comes to mind is when you first visit the house, seeing your mother catatonic in the chair, drenched in water. Something about her being drenched in water, holding a gun to her lap, not even facing Alex with a straight face, just dead expressions. It gave me not only honest chills, but a callback to the side characters of 2, Eddie and Angela. And I know that seems like a bad thing for those characters, but honestly, I think it's a major compliment to the mother's design and writing. Both Eddie and Angela are characters that I think if taken away would have made Silent Hill 2 way less compelling. Alex's mother is cold here, deprived of any emotion. The sounds that play during this part honestly really tie the scene together, and it gives you a sense of hopelessness, like she has given up entirely and your help isn't wanted or needed. It's honestly really sad. It sounds like you're being drowned under deep water.
Mom. Mom.
Alex. What are you doing here?
I just got discharged. I was in the hospital for a bit, but I'm alright now.
You've been gone too long.
Yeah. Where is everybody? Where's Josh?
I don't know. Your father went to look for him. But now he's gone. Everyone's gone.
Mom, what's going on here? What happened? Mom.
I miss your brother, Alex.
Look. I'll find him. I had this dream. I just have a feeling he's in trouble. Don't worry about it. I'll find Joshua. Mom, your dress is... What was that?
The basement.
I'm gonna go look around. You just stay here.
The music playing in this scene ties it together as well, and as well as you roaming around the house, Alex's face isn't seen on any of the pictures inside the house, giving off the impression that he's forgotten. This scene sets the entire mood for seeing Alex's mother like this, seeing the walls drenched in water, the paint running off the walls. And in all honesty, it's a scene that I think they did so well that they never hit the same mark again outside of one other scene. The next scene I can think of that really comes to hit the mark Homecoming was going for is the scene after revisiting your home. We see our mother strapped to a contraption that's coming straight out of Saw. Hearing your mom beg that she promises she loved you, but after only being forced in a torture device, screams that they never really loved you in the first place. And the song that played when you entered your house the first time rolls back this time. At the end, no matter what choice you make, she dies. Sounds familiar, right? And Alex is sunken in grief watching your mother die and blames himself. Sounds familiar, right? The major point here is that Homecoming really ripped off the motif that Alex is here to learn about something he did and was punished for. And then he would just throw Pyramid Head in the mix as well and then just renamed him Boogeyman. Unfortunately, a lot of Silent Hill Homecoming's issues stem from the developer's urge to push a game out quickly. As seen recently with most games that come out in today's time, I for one think Homecoming could have at least been a cool title that was just a bit of cool stuff for fans of the game with a modern twist. Unfortunately, we live in a time where some of the greatest minds to touch horror get a title rejected, and the only reason being is cause Kojima. Unfortunately, now we are beginning to see our later generation games being more and more lost in time, and treated horribly, might I add, because gaming standards must be really low if Homecoming as a title comes off as not too bad anymore. With what recently has been released, hell, Callisto makes Homecoming look like a AAA Silent Hill title in comparison. But as to why Silent Hill Homecoming isn't a bad title, I think even with all the mistakes I've pointed out this turn, Homecoming still had potential, and sometimes I see that potential. Sometimes I see what the developers were doing and I see the wheels turning, and then a monkey throws a wrench in the mix and it all fails, which is so unfortunate because Silent Hill Downpour has no sustenance and is seen as a better game. Lastly, to wrap up my main points, I just want to say that Silent Hill Homecoming might have been a flop, but I think we should all take a step back and realize that some of these older games, even though they might be scuffed around the edges, they are really fun to play. One of those games that made me realize that was Vampire the Masquerade. That game was very, very wonky and buggy when it first came out, and it still is, but because people have passions for games and they want to see games flourish, that game, after a few patches and bugs, is one of the funnest games I've ever played because of how immersive it is. And I think if maybe the Silent Hill community came together and figured out what was wrong with Homecoming instead of just bickering about it and trying to force the developers to make a game they don't want to play. I mean, just look at the PC port for Silent Hill 2. That has been a almost 10-year run of just constant bugs, patches, and fixes for Silent Hill 2's PC port to make it play as closely to the PlayStation 2 port as possible. And that is one of the most refined and greatly tuned community mods I've ever seen in my life. So I think maybe we should all just take a step back for a second and realize that there are some titles out there that deserve a lot of respect. Let me know what y'all think. I know this is a little different, and this wasn't really necessarily a retrospective or like a long-formed essay. This was pretty much me just laying down the groundwork to people to realize that Homecoming wasn't as bad as some like to make it seem. Granted, I did shit on Homecoming quite a lot, and I will say that those are all valid, but I want people to look at things from the bright side as well as the dark side at the same time to try to see if they can get a new perspective on the game. And if I could show a new perspective on this game, then I would love that. I know I haven't uploaded in, I want to say, 4 or 5 months. Life has been very intense recently. I was forced out of my old living situation pretty abruptly after making certain life choices to better it. As well as I've been just moving into my new place and trying to push streaming a lot more. But I think I'm back to making YouTube videos. I know literally last video I said that, and then it took 3 months to make. We'll see. I can't really guarantee anything, but let's just hope for the best. If this receives a lot of support, it's definitely going to make me want to make another one. So if that's the case, then I will see y'all next video. Bye-bye!